Poetry Light Night is a collaboration between Off the Shelf Festival of Words, Ruskin in Sheffield and WordLife and Opus Independence. It's a celebration really of John Ruskin, who was kind of a celebrated writer, philanthropist, social thinker. He was particularly active here in Sheffield. And we started having conversations with Off the Shelf about a project to do for 2015, and we got really excited about the idea of doing a projection project onto a building, and then Off the Shelf suggested working with Ruskin in kind. So yeah, that was how the project developed, and in the end what we decided to do was to commission two writers to write original poems based on their interpretations of Ruskin's own writing, and then to commission two filmmakers to then interpret those poems and turn them into film poems that we're about to see projected onto this building behind us today.
When you work with poetry and film, I think for me the really interesting thing to do is to try and, rather than just illustrate what the words are, to try and look at the subtext or try and find the theme or some underlying idea that you can bring out in the visuals. So the key thing for me is always to try not to take the audience too far away from listening, because listening is quite an art in itself. And when you've got images to look at as well, it can be really tempting to be watching those and forgetting about what you're listening to. That sounds odd, but that's, I think, what happens. So the really interesting thing and the key element for me is that element of how you engage the viewer and encourage them to listen. So you bring something out in the visuals that is sort of adding more to what you're listening to.
My poem, our film, ended up being called Speak Plainly Today About Beauty. And I read as much as I could about Ruskin, watched videos and so on, read his quotes, and I was struck by two things in particular. One was a video which talks about how as a young man he was obsessed with beauty in art and architecture and nature. But as his life went on, he used that obsession with beauty to question why the Victorian world was becoming so ugly with industrialisation and so on, and why people were being treated so badly. So that stuck with me.
In the animation I've done tonight, the favourite bit is I think actually now it's where the women come in, but that's because when I showed it to Joe and Joe said, when you bring the women in over the social changes, it looks really good. And actually I hadn't realised that I'd made that connection. And when he realised that connection, I made the women bigger, and I suddenly thought, that's a really nice moment. And it's not literal, but it makes sense.
That was great. I think it's visually beautiful. I think it serves the poem really well. And I think it was really clever how it was designed to fit around the contours of the building. So the figures walk along a certain ledge, and two guys do handstands either side of the entrance. I thought it was also clever the way she used the visuals from the Victorian filmmaker Muybridge.
John Ruskin said, "The greatest thing a human soul ever does in this world is to see something and tell what it saw in a plain way. To see clearly is poetry, prophecy, and religion all in one." Wake, thankfully. Stand, humbly. Walk, slowly. Travel, widely. Read, avidly. See, clearly. Speak plainly. Ask simply. Answer truthfully. Dream endlessly. Plan steadily. Learn naturally. Live hopefully. Love absolutely. Fight fearlessly. But go softly. Tread gently. Touch lightly. Treat fairly. Teach constantly. Inspire deeply. To make soulfully. Craft passionately. Create wholeheartedly. To think morally. Act responsibly. Work collectively. To build gracefully. Change socially, politically, and economically. To be gloriously, magnificently, joyously, honestly, locally, globally, universally, eternally, divinely, sublimely, beautiful. We can. Speak plainly today about beauty.
I got involved with the project as a result of really answering a brief that was put on our Facebook page, which was pretty cool, you know, and I saw it pop up and I'm like, ooh, this is like hearkening back to the PhD roots, you know, which I haven't really thought about in a little while now. You know, I did a PhD in film and poetry.
Many things were inspirational for the poem Praise Song for an Acorn. I think particularly I became fascinated by Ruskin's obsession with things in miniature. I would describe him as a miniaturist. And as a romantic, I also was fascinated by his interest in nature and the elements. And I guess we would call it poetically pathetic fallacy, the idea that the universe in some way understands human emotion.
You're right, I don't like it when it's too literal. If you're too on the nose and you animate every single thing that is coming out from the verse, it just feels like, you know, you're trying to squeeze in too much, and let the audience start piecing things together. Let them connect things in the same way that they have to do that when they read a poem without necessarily any images.
And so I wanted to celebrate the fact that sometimes the smallest things in this life and the smallest things in this world are the things that we overlook, and yet they are the most beautiful. And also they are the most mighty. A favourite moment is the moment when the acorn turns into the moon in the piece, and it absolutely sits on the point where I say moon in the text.
I love it when all those leaves are cascading across the building like that. It looks really colorful and beautiful. I know that some of those leaves are my wife's. I also like it when the leaves come back again and I see some of the birds, you know, imposed, composited on the leaves, which I know also painted by my wife. So it's kind of a nice, both of those moments are beautiful and nice, and they make me smile.
Praise Song for an Acorn. Dearling, on this damp night of your ripening, you are the jewel upon the branch, an outstretched arm in praise of the skyline. Your silhouette, the moon's drawing, the curve of you, a sketch of continuity and inheritance. This light beholds you, as true as the rock which holds the miracle. Inside your tiny skull lives memory, ablaze as amethyst and potential, as sure as the oak root defines the wisest of desire lines. Surrounding you, a crown, each leaf its pledge in deep green serpentine. You are an oak in miniature. You will outlive all of us blood and flesh and breath witnesses, and beyond this pasture of your infancy, you will rise higher through the politics of air to shade our forebears from adversity's heat, thought generations, whom we can only meet in the corridors of dreams. Yours will be the pencil line of childhood's first attempt to draw a sky, no thought of clouds. Till on the dwindling pages of life's book, you will be the pigment lit by the spell of a sunset, leading to dark and the moon, in which we all become the silhouettes that we are, written in the dust of stars.
I hope Ruskin would enjoy both of the films. My aim was to try and do justice to his teachings and to speak about them plainly. He was a man obsessed with beauty, and I think we've made two beautiful films here, and hopefully you'll be proud of them.
I think what he'd like about my projection is the way that he works with the idea of simplicity and beauty and being true to yourself. And I think Muybridge, which is what I've used to sort of do the animation, is working with simplicity and the kind of you add on more and more, and something becomes more complex and interesting.
No idea what Ruskin would make of the poem film if he were alive today. I mean, I hope all these decades after his death that there would be something of him, in him, that was humbled at the fact that writers in the 21st century are being inspired by his work, and not just writers but animators and filmmakers are celebrating his work and his life through their artistry.